10 solos are 1 decade, and every single note on this list changed something in the music, in the culture, or in the lives of the people who played them. You've heard most of these songs your whole life, but I'd be willing to bet you don't know half of what was actually happening when those notes were being played. Who made them, what they almost didn't play, what it cost, and in some cases, what happened to them after. That's what we're here for. This is the 10 best solos in R&B history, the 70s edition. And we're starting at number 10 with a man who was, for most of his life, the greatest musician in any room he walked into. And almost nobody knew his name. Number 10, Donny Hathaway. Electric Piano. The Ghetto, 1970. A Song for You, 1971. Here's a question I want you to sit with for a second. If I said the greatest keyboard player in the history of R&B soul, what name comes to mind? Because I'd be willing to bet the right answer doesn't show up on the first guess for most people. Donny Hathaway, born in Chicago in 1945, raised in St. Louis by his grandmother, a professional gospel singer who had him performing in church services before he could read music notation. By the time he arrived at Howard University on a full music scholarship, his professors were already dealing with something they didn't quite have a word for. He wasn't studying. He was arriving. Then he got to Atlantic Records, and Atlantic didn't sign him as a singer. They signed him because of what he could do with a keyboard in a studio. The way he could hear a song and immediately find the part that needed to breathe underneath it. His debut record, The Ghetto, in 1970, opened up with an electric piano figure that told you immediately, this is someone who thinks differently, not technically cleaner, not louder, just further in, like he knew where the feeling lived and had been there before. Here's what gets me about Hathaway. He played on the sessions of some of the biggest names in the business. He was Roberta Flack's frequent collaborator. He produced, he arranged. He was the session pianist on Curtis Mayfield recordings. And when he and Roberta Flack recorded Where Is the Love as a duet in 1972, it won the Grammy for Best Pop Vocal Performance, Duo, Group, or Chorus. The two of them together in a room, just communicating through music, produced the most recognized version of a song that has been covered dozens of times since. But here's what the music alone can't tell you, and what matters for this list. When Hathaway played a solo on A Song for You, on the live versions he recorded for his 1972 live album, which is still considered one of the most extraordinary live R&B documents ever put on tape. There was something that didn't have a technical explanation, notes that just breathed, an electric piano that seemed to move from the chest instead of the hand. If you've ever heard music that makes you stop whatever you're doing and just sit still, you know exactly what I'm talking about. He died on January 13th, 1979. He was 33 years old. The story of how he died, falling from a 15th floor window of the Essex House Hotel in New York City, is something I'll let you look up on your own, because this isn't the place for it. What I want you to know is that the music he left behind is not nearly as well known as it should be. And the solos he played were the kind that make you understand why the instrument was invented. That's number 10. Number 9 is a man who was the secret backbone of a sound you've known since childhood, and who recorded his biggest hit in his own basement. Number 9, Dennis Coffey. wah-wah guitar, Scorpio, 1971. Here's something that shouldn't be true. One of the most distinctive guitar sounds in the history of Motown, heard on hit after hit after hit, never appeared next to the player's name on a single record label, not once. And yet, if you've heard Ball of Confusion or Edwin Starr's War or Someday We'll Be Together by Diana Ross and the Supremes, you have been hearing this man's guitar your whole life. Dennis Coffey, born in Detroit in 1940, one of the original Funk Brothers, the invisible studio band that played behind every major Motown act for over a decade. Motown credited almost nobody in those early years. That was the arrangement. Berry Gordy believed the label was the star, not the musicians. So Coffey played guitar on dozens of landmark records and collected his session fee and went home. That was how it worked. What Coffey brought to Motown that nobody had used in mainstream R&B before was the wah-wah pedal. In 1968, he walked into Norman Whitfield's session for the Temptations' Cloud 9 and put the pedal on the guitar intro. Whitfield heard it and said, "That's what I want." And the sound of Motown changed that afternoon. But here's the part of the story most people don't know. In 1971, Coffey decided to record a solo instrumental. He secretly recruited a few Funk Brothers for the rhythm section, not exactly an approved arrangement, and he brought them into a home recording setup. The song was called Scorpio, and what he did in the production is one of the most creative decisions of the entire decade. 9 guitars. He layered 9 separate guitar parts on top of each other, each one a fragment of a chord or a melody line stacked to sound like a horn section. Low parts played through a wah-wah pedal to simulate a trombone. Higher parts with fuzz tone for brass, all of it coming from one man, recorded multiple times, built in his own basement. Scorpio hit number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100, gold record, and the song became a staple in black dance clubs before it ever charted, which is how Dennis Coffey became the first white artist to ever perform on Soul Train in 1972. That fact tends to stop people. The riff was later sampled by Public Enemy, Young MC, the Beastie Boys, and dozens more. It became foundational to hip-hop's breakbeat culture, and the man who built it 9 guitar tracks at a time in his basement is still largely invisible to the listeners who carry his influence in their ears every day. If you've ever heard Scorpio in a sample somewhere and nodded without knowing why, now you know. That's number 9. Number 8, in one of the rarest things in pop music history, a number 1 hit where the artist decided at the last second not to sing. Real talk, only 9% of you are subscribed. That hurts. We're spending hours digging through archives, fact-checking every detail, bringing these stories back to life. And if you're watching this far, you clearly care. So hit subscribe. It's free and takes 2 seconds. Now, to my subscribers, barely any of you have joined the membership. And honestly, that stings even more. You know the work we put in. You keep coming back. If these videos have ever made you feel something, if this music means something to you, join the membership. It's $1 coffee a month, and it's the only way we keep this going. Let's build this together. All right, back to it. Number 8, Love Unlimited Orchestra, Gene Page. String Orchestra, Love's Theme, 1974. Barry White had a voice. You know this. The man sounded like James Earl Jones deciding to make his voice warmer. So when Barry White composed a piece of music and then, at the last possible second, chose not to add his voice to it, that requires an explanation. And the explanation is that someone else's work was too beautiful to interrupt. Love's Theme. Barry White wrote the melody in 1965, 9 years before most people ever heard it. Released in late 1973 by his 40-piece Love Unlimited Orchestra. Barry had planned to add vocals. The arrangement was going to be a full song with lyrics. He handed it over to a string arranger named Gene Page, someone he trusted completely, and waited to hear what came back. What came back was a lush, so layered, so quietly overwhelming that White reportedly set down his pen. There's a quote from a session musician who was in the room when White first heard the playback. After Gene Page did his string parts, Barry White said it was so beautiful, he decided not to put on the vocal. He said, "Gene's strings are so beautiful. Why mess it up with the vocal?" And so, the voice that built Barry White's entire career stayed silent, and what remained went to number 1. Love's Theme hit the top of the Billboard Hot 100 in February of 1974, knocked Barbra Streisand's The Way We Were off the top spot, ranked as the 3rd biggest song of the entire year on the year-end chart, gold record. And it became one of a very small number of purely orchestral singles to ever top the American pop charts, without a word sung, without a voice. Just Gene Page's strings and a rhythm section doing the work that the human voice was supposed to do. That's the part that stays with me. The thing that should have been there wasn't. The most famous element of any Barry White record, that voice, was absent. And it was still number 1 because what was left was extraordinary enough to carry the whole weight of the song without it. Gene Page arranged strings on dozens of the era's biggest hits, built the sonic architecture of an entire era of music, and the name on the label said someone else. Some things don't change. That's number 8. Number 7, we're going to Memphis. To a guitarist who helped write some of the most beloved soul songs in history, played roadhouses for $20 a night, and whose nephew turned out to be someone very famous. Number 7, Teenie Hodges. She can make it right. Guitar, Love and Happiness / Al Green's High Records catalog, early 70s. Memphis, in the early 70s, had a secret that didn't travel well. The musicians who built the High Record sound, the people who played behind Al Green on every landmark record he made, were largely unknown outside the city. They worked out of Royal Studios on South Elvis Presley Boulevard, a former movie theater. The control room was up in the projection booth, and the nucleus of what happened in that room was a guitar player named Teenie Hodges, Mabon, Teenie Hodges, born in Germantown, Tennessee in 1945, one of 12 children, self-taught on guitar from age 12. His brothers Charles and Leroy played alongside him organ and bass, and together, under producer Willie Mitchell, they formed the High Rhythm section, the band behind Al Green for the run of records in the early 70s that gave us Let's Stay Together, I'm Still in Love with You, Take Me to the River, and Love and Happiness. Al Green said this about Teenie. He doesn't play a lot of music, but what he plays is sophisticated. He'll play a little guitar, just a taste, but it means so much because he puts it in the right place. That's the entire philosophy right there. Not more, not louder, more right. And the guitar riff that opens Love and Happiness, that slow, deliberate, almost conversational pull across the strings, is one of the most recognizable 3-second passages in the history of soul music. There's a story from a 1973 Rolling Stone feature about those sessions. A High Record session musician said, "I think Al picked up a lot of his moves from Teenie. His cousin was a session player for Motown, and he used to come down from Detroit and copy Teenie's licks, while Teenie was playing in roadhouses for $20 a night." Listen to that again. Motown session players were driving down from Detroit to copy the licks of a man who was making $20 a show. And the man with the licks still wasn't a household name. Teenie co-wrote 13 gold or platinum singles with Al Green alone. "Take Me to the River," "Here I Am," "Come and Take Me," "Love and Happiness." And if you're nodding right now, knowing all three of those titles by heart, you know his fingerprints better than you know his name. Here's the part that stops conversations cold. Teenie Hodges was Drake's uncle, his actual uncle. Drake flew Teenie out to appear in the video for Worst Behavior in 2013. And Teenie, by then needing an oxygen tank because of emphysema, showed up and played because that's what musicians do. He died in June of 2014 at 68, and the first paragraph of most of the obituaries mentioned Drake. I'll let you sit with that. That's number 7. Number 6, 1971. Motown didn't want to release the album, and the most important saxophone on it was played by a man who thought he was just goofing around. Number 6, Eli Fontaine plus Wild Bill Moore. Alto and tenor saxophone, What's Going On, Marvin Gaye, 1971, the most recognizable opening in the history of R&B. That alto saxophone that breathes in at the very beginning of What's Going On was not planned. Not written, not in any arrangement. The man who played it was just warming up, playing around, feeling out the room. And when Marvin Gaye heard it from the other side of the glass, he walked out into the studio and told the musician, "You goof off exquisitely. Thank you." The year is 1970. Marvin Gaye has decided he wants to record a protest record, an album about Vietnam, police brutality, poverty, the environment. He goes to Berry Gordy with the idea. Gordy tells him flat out, "Don't be ridiculous." Marvin records it anyway. For the title track, he brings in a Detroit saxophone legend named Eli Fontaine to play. And Fontaine, thinking the tape isn't rolling, thinking he's just warming up, plays that loose, open, swinging alto saxophone phrase that opens the song. 4 bars. A question mark turned into music. Fontaine, when he heard himself say he was just goofing around, got the response that became one of the great quotes in recording history. Gaye kept the take, and the accidental warm-up became the opening of what Rolling Stone would eventually rank as the greatest album of all time in their 2020 list. The first time a black artist had ever topped that ranking. And it's not just What's Going On. If you've sat with this album start to finish, which if you haven't, you owe yourself that experience before this video is over. You know there's a quality to the whole thing that doesn't exist anywhere else. The musicians aren't performing behind Gaye. They're in conversation with him. The sessions were loose by design. There was marijuana smoke and rounds of scotch, according to engineers who were there. The whole thing was recorded like a document of something actually happening, not a construction of something that was supposed to sound like it. Then there's Mercy, Mercy Me. Midway through that track, Wild Bill Moore's tenor saxophone enters and does something I can only describe as grief in note form. Moore was already a Detroit legend. He'd been playing since the 1940s. Gaye sought him out specifically because he needed musicians who knew how to listen, not just perform. And what Moore does in those bars is what every instrumentalist is chasing. Notes that say something the words can't finish. A horn that sounds like awareness, like someone standing in front of something they cannot look away from and choosing not to look away anyway. Two saxophonists, one who was goofing around, one who had decades of hard knowledge in his hands, and together they're part of the most important album in the history of R&B. Sometimes the most perfect thing is the one nobody planned. That's number 6, coming up. A mid-script shift, and then the top 5, where the solos stop being moments and start being history. Number 5, Melvin Wah Wah Watson, Ragin' plus Paul Reiser. Guitar and string arrangement, Papa Was a Rolling Stone, The Temptations, 1972. The Temptations did not want to record this song. I need you to sit with that for a second. The group that gave us My Girl, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, Just My Imagination, and I Can't Get Next to You, and one of the greatest vocal groups in the history of American music, fought tooth and nail not to record what would become their final number 1 hit. And the reason they didn't want to record it was that the instruments were going to matter more than the voices. Producer Norman Whitfield had an idea. A cinematic, fully orchestrated piece of music. 12 minutes in its full version, where the instrumentation would carry the song's emotional weight before any voice was heard. He brought in arranger Paul Reiser to write the string arrangement. Spent most of his time chasing women and drinking. Reiser, who had been blown away by the Shaft soundtrack, described the bass line as something that spoke to him like a film score. The soundtrack to Shaft was a big influence, Reiser said. I had seen the film and loved what they did with the orchestration. The bass on Papa had a similar feel. He used 9 violins, 4 violas, 3 cellos, and a harp. And he put the guitar parts in the hands of Funk Brothers musicians Melvin, Wah Wah Watson, Roggin, and Paul Warren. The Temptations were so upset about being sidelined by the instrumentation that they nearly walked. Lead singer Dennis Edwards almost refused to record the song because the opening lyric mentioned the 3rd of September, and his own father had died on the 3rd of October. He thought Whitfield was personally needling him. Whitfield had no idea. He chose the date because it fit the rhythm. That is how close the world came to never hearing this song. The album version runs 11 minutes and 46 seconds. The vocals don't enter until nearly 4 minutes in. Before that, it's layers building on layers. Bass guitar, hi-hat, Wah Wah Watson's guitar, strings, and echo-drenched trumpet, hand claps. All of it on one chord. B minor, the entire song, 11 and a half minutes, one chord. And the result is something hypnotic enough to make you forget the clock. At the 1973 Grammy Awards, Papa Was a Rolling Stone won 3 trophies, one for the Temptations' vocal performance, one for Whitfield and Strong songwriting, and one, a separate Grammy for Best R&B Instrumental Performance for the B-side, the instrumental version with no vocals at all. The Funk Brothers and Paul Reiser were recognized independently from the song they had built, meaning the musicians, the ones the Temptations hadn't wanted to compete with, won their own trophy for the very thing the Temptations had wanted removed. Dennis Edwards later admitted he didn't love Papa Was a Rolling Stone until he heard the playback, and then he said, "Wow, That's what a great solo does. Changes the way you hear everything around it. That's number 5. Number 4 is the most personal solo on this list. A man who improvised his way through a song about his newborn daughter and refused point blank to cut a single second of it for radio. Number 4, Stevie Wonder. Harmonica, Isn't She Lovely, 1976. Motown wanted Stevie Wonder to shorten Isn't She Lovely for radio. The song ran over 6 minutes and 30 seconds, far too long for the 45 RPM single format. They needed him to trim it. Radio was asking for it. Stevie Wonder said no. Not partially, not maybe, no. And the harmonica solo that closes the full album version, the one that wouldn't fit on the single, is the entire point of the song. Isn't She Lovely? He was written in 1976 for his daughter, Aisha Morris, who had just been born. Songs in the Key of Life, the Disqualify, the double album that contains it, had become the first album by an American artist to debut straight at number 1 on the Billboard charts. Stevie had negotiated complete creative control as part of a $13 million contract with Motown. Which meant when the label came with their scissors, he didn't have to open the door. The song opens with the actual sound of a baby's first cry, recorded during an actual birth, then his voice, then almost immediately the harmonica. And here's what most people don't know about that solo. Stevie improvised it entirely. There was no arrangement, no written melody. He sat down, and whatever came out of the instrument in that moment was the solo. And somewhere in the middle of it, one specific moment, he made a mistake, a note that didn't belong. He admitted to it decades later when engineers isolated the track at a documentary session. He said simply, "I'll admit to that mistake." And then he left it in because the mistake was human and the song was about his daughter and it was already perfect. Stevie played every instrument on the track himself except for some keyboard parts from Greg Phillinganes. He played the harmonica with a chromatic technique that players spend entire careers trying to understand. And the closing section of the full version, the part that got cut from the radio edit, layers the harmonica over the actual sound of Stevie giving Aisha a bath. The baby complaining, the water splashing, his voice in the background, the solo continuing around all of it. It's intimate in a way that very few recordings in any genre managed to achieve. Paul McCartney later said, "Isn't She Lovely" is one of the greatest songs of the modern era. Now Paul McCartney has heard a few songs. What he was responding to is what happens when you give a parent complete creative control over a piece of music about their child and no external force to tell them when to stop. The song ends when it has said everything it needed to say, not a second before. If you've ever felt something too big for the container the world offers you, you understand why Stevie didn't cut that harmonica. Some things aren't radio friendly. That's the point. That's number 4. Number 3 is the solo that won its creator an Oscar, and the Academy tried to stop him from receiving it. Number 3, Skip Pitts' Wah Wah Guitar theme from Shaft, Isaac Hayes, 1971. In 1971, Isaac Hayes sat in the Stax studios in Memphis with a small group of musicians and in under 2 hours built one of the most recognizable opening sequences in the history of American music. the hi-hat, the bass, the guitar riff that seems to lean forward like something's about to happen. All of it assembled before lunchtime from pieces that already existed, one of which had been sitting on a shelf, unused for years. MGM Pictures came to Hayes because they needed a score for Shaft, Gordon Parks' gritty crime film about a black private eye. Hayes had never scored a film. When he flew to New York to meet the producers, he could see the anxiety on their faces. They tested him by giving him one scene, Shaft walking up from a subway station, and sending him home to see what he could do. Hayes got the footage, flew back to Memphis, and called his guitarist. Charles "Skip" Pitts had played with Wilson Pickett. He'd played on the Isley Brothers' It's Your Thing. He'd been in Hayes' band since 1970. When Hayes described what he wanted, a driving rhythm that matched the way Shaft moved through a scene, Pitts pulled out a guitar riff from an unfinished Stax song that had never been released. He ran it through a crybaby wah-wah pedal. Willie Hall built the hi-hat pattern, drawing from a break on Otis Redding's Try a Little Tenderness, and they had the core of Theme from Shaft done in 2 hours. On even the edited single version, the intro runs more than a minute and a half before Hayes' voice arrives. Radio stations in 1971 were not built for that, but they couldn't ignore it, and because the wah-wah riff was simply undeniable. Theme from Shaft hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in November of 1971. And in 1972, Isaac Hayes walked onto the Academy Awards stage in a chainmail vest, performed the song for the world, came back later that night in a tuxedo, and accepted the Oscar for Best Original Song. First African American to win an Academy Award in a non-acting category. But here's the part that tends to make people stop. The Academy had initially tried to disqualify the nomination. Their argument was that Hayes couldn't write music because he didn't read or notate in the traditional sense. Quincy Jones had to personally appear before the Academy to argue that this was a real composition worthy of consideration. Think about that. The most recognized musical opening of 1971. And someone needed to be talked into believing it counted. Skip Pitts went on to collaborate with Hayes for nearly 4 decades. His wah-wah riff was later sampled by Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, the Beastie Boys, Massive Attack, Jay-Z, and hundreds of others. He died in 2012 at 65, and the obituaries when they ran were modest. Some things don't get the recognition they deserve during the lifetime of the person who made them. Pitts said in a 2011 interview, looking back at the song, "I didn't think nothing of that song. That's number 3. The top 2 are Stevie Wonder, and they're going to hit very differently from each other. Number 2, you've been hearing it since you were a kid. The story behind it might be the most surprising thing in this entire video. Number 2, Stevie Wonder. Clavinet. Superstition, 1972. In 1972, Stevie Wonder made a deal with a guitarist. The deal was simple. The guitarist would come in and play on Wonder's upcoming album. In return, Wonder would write him a song as a thank you. Do all that you can. The guitarist was Jeff Beck. The song Wonder wrote for him was Superstition, which Motown then refused to give to Jeff Beck, which Jeff Beck recorded anyway, which nobody noticed, which became Stevie Wonder's first number 1 hit in 9 years. Here's how it happened. Beck came into Electric Lady Studios in New York to contribute guitar parts to Talking Book. One afternoon, the two of them were just in the room together, and Beck sat down at the drums and started playing a beat. Wonder picked up the clavinet, a 5-octave electronic keyboard. It was something between a harpsichord and a funky guitar, and improvised. He played what he heard coming out of Beck's drums, and what he played was the riff that opened Superstition. The agreement was that Beck's version would be released first through his trio Beck, Bogert, and Appice. That was the deal, but Motown CEO Berry Gordy heard the song and said no. He told Stevie, "This is going to be massive, and you're releasing it on Talking Book." Beck's version eventually came out. It didn't chart. Wonder's version hit number 1 on both the Billboard Hot 100 and the R&B chart simultaneously. His first chart topper since Fingertips Part 2 in 1963. 9 years between number ones. But here's what I want you to know about the riff itself. What you hear at the beginning of Superstition, that thing that sounds like one continuous funky groove, the thing that your body has a physical reaction to before you've consciously decided to react, is actually 8 separate clavinet tracks recorded individually and layered on top of each other. 8. Stevie recorded the main part, then a counterpart, then overdubbed both through an Echoplex tape delay, multiple signal paths, multiple amplifier mic outputs, all of it stacked until what sounds like one impossibly funky thing is actually 8 performances by one man. A music critic named Tom Moon described it this way: when you hear that clavinet intro to Superstition, what you're hearing is someone who is interacting with an instrument and figuring out how to make it sound like him. No one else plays the clavinet like Stevie Wonder. He made it speak. Before Superstition, the Honor clavinet was a relatively obscure keyboard used mostly in jazz and academic settings. After Superstition, every session player wanted one. It became the defining texture of a generation of R&B and funk music. And the man who put it on the map was 22 years old, improvising at midnight in a room with a drummer who didn't know the song he was helping to invent. Wash your face and hands. Rolling Stone ranked Superstition number 12 on their 2021 list of the 500 greatest songs of all time. Jeff Beck got a nice story to tell. That's number 2. Number 1, this is a musician who spent 16 albums being critically praised and commercially invisible, and then he did something in a guitar solo that had never been done before by anybody, and the music industry finally had no choice but to notice. Number 1, George Benson. Guitar plus voice, This Masquerade, Breezin', 1976. There is one guitarist in the history of R&B who during his solo did something that nobody had ever done before with quite this much grace. He sang it, not separately, not a vocal, and then the guitar. At the exact same moment his fingers were finding the notes on the strings, his voice was following them. Same phrase, same rhythm, same melody, guitar and voice saying the identical thing at the identical time. George Benson, born in Pittsburgh in 1943. He was performing in a corner store for tips by age 7 and had a record out by the time he was 10. A child prodigy in the truest sense. By his 20s, he was already considered one of the finest jazz guitarists alive, a musician's musician, someone other players referred to in the same breath as Wes Montgomery. And he spent most of the 1970s releasing critically acclaimed jazz albums that almost nobody bought. Not because they weren't extraordinary, they were, but because the world wasn't quite ready to find him. His 16th album. By 1976, George Benson was on his 16th record. And that's when Breezin' came out on Warner Brothers, a jazz album with one difference, one track, one song with a vocal. A song that had been written in 1965 by Leon Russell, released in 1972 as a B-side on a single, covered by the Carpenters, covered by Helen Reddy, covered by a dozen others. This Masquerade, a song about two people pretending to still be in love. And George Benson recorded it, and he played the guitar solo the way he'd always played solos, except this time, he sang along with himself, note for note, scat vocal matching every phrase his fingers played. A technique he'd developed organically over years of playing so intuitively that his voice and his guitar had become the same instinct, the same musical reflex, just running through two different channels simultaneously. He'd been doing it informally for years, but nobody had ever heard it captured like this on a record. Most radio stations initially refused to play this Masquerade. The album version runs over 8 minutes. Nobody at radio knew who George Benson was. Then a disc jockey at a New Orleans station called Wild, a man named Ty Bell, started spinning it, and the phones didn't stop. The record spread station by station, city by city, until the album hit number 1 on the Billboard 200. And according to people who were working in record stores at the time, customers kept coming in and asking who the artist was because they'd never heard anyone play and sing like this. And some of them were convinced it was a new Stevie Wonder song. At the 19th Grammy Awards in 1977, this Masquerade won Record of the Year. Not Best R&B, not Best Jazz. Record of the Year, the highest award the Recording Academy gives. Benson also took home Best Pop Instrumental Performance and Best R&B Instrumental Performance that same night. 3 Grammys in one evening. After 16 albums of working in rooms where the mainstream wasn't looking, the technique itself, following your own guitar line with your voice in real time, is now studied by jazz and R&B guitarists around the world. There's a name for what he did. But in 1976, in that studio with producer Tommy LaPuma on the other side of the glass, it was just what George Benson did when he played a solo. It was natural to him, which is exactly what makes it extraordinary to everyone else. 16 albums, 1 solo, and then the world finally caught up. That is number 1.